We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
This crusade, this war on terrorism, is going to take a while.
We came, we saw, we died.
We tortured some folks.
Yourselves to these unnatural men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are not cattle, you are men. You have the love of humanity in your hearts. You don't hate, only the unloved hate, the unloved and the unnatural. Soldiers, don't fight for slavery, fight for liberty.
And the pod's been parked. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. It's episode 44 of Dave versus Goliath. Appreciate you being here with me to help me take on the world. I need you today. It's been a rough couple days. Real quick, before we get into this, this is super personal stuff, but I usually try and keep it pretty light on the show, even if we're talking about downer stuff. But yesterday, I lost my dog of 10 years. Her name was Evie. We got her Christmas Eve of 2012. And we named her after Evie Hammond when we came home from Christmas Eve dinner and caught that movie, and it just felt right. And she has provided me and my girl with 10 years of joy, and she lost her battle to cancer yesterday. And it's been an awful couple days, I'm not going to lie, and been doing a lot of ugly crying, and it'll be good. I'm not going to let this be a blight on the evening. We're going to talk about uplifting shit like the prospect of nuclear war and things like that. But I just wanted to tell you that because I try to keep it real around here. And, if you're like, well, he's not in his usual jovial self, that's why. And I did not want to cancel on the great Scott Horton tonight because that's not what you do. And before I bring him on, since he doesn't take compliments so well, he's a pretty humble guy. The thing I've been thinking about it, and the thing I admire most about the guy is his willingness to stare death in the face every day at antiwar.com and the work that he does, and he's been doing for decades. And he'll tell you it's no big deal. I just get up there and give a speech or whatever, good on the radio. But dedicating your life to that and really taking that on means the world. And I admire the shit out of that. So, I kind of blew the wad there. We got a really special guest tonight. But before we bring him out, yesterday when things were really rough, I called my main man, Dan.
Yo.
And I said, dog, if I'm a mess tomorrow, you're going to take the reins. You've read enough already, and you know exactly what to do. If I just start balling all over myself, I think I'll be good. But you stepped up, and I appreciate you being here, man.
Yeah, it's a hell of a way to start. You're doing great.
Thanks, bro. Yeah, I mean, it's essential. I feel like, I knew I wanted to do this show, and I also knew I didn't want to fake the funk and like, yeah, everything's great, So This is the best that I could do. But we're going to put that behind us because we got a great one tonight. So if you're hearing this, please share the links. Please leave a nice review and all the things, smash the likes and all the stuff. But man, we got the great Scott Horton tonight, the director of the Libertarian Institute, editorial director of Antiwar.com, host of Antiwar Radio for Pacifica 90.7 KPFK in Los Angeles, and host of the Scott Horton Show. He's well on his way to 6,000 interviews by now. Author of Enough Already, Time to End the War on Terrorism, Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan, and the editor of the great Ron Paul, The Scott Horton Show interviews from 2004 to 2019, author of Hotter Than the Sun, Time to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, and the forthcoming Provoked, How America Started the New Cold War with Russia and the Catastrophe in Ukraine. Ladies and gentlemen, the great Scott Horton. Scott, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. And I'm real sorry to hear about your dog. I'm a dog lover myself, and I feel real bad for you. It sucks.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. I had a feeling that that you might be a dog guy, and I appreciate those words, man.
Got
It
2
means a lot.
dogs and 2 cats.
We still have one cat in there, and he's great, and he's keeping my girl company right now. And thank you, man. That means a lot.
Yeah,
Uh,
sorry to hear that, dude.
Thank you,
Shit.
brother. So we're gonna move on from that from here on out. So Scott, this past week was great. Figure this is how life goes, right? Extreme highs and extreme lows. Last week was amazing at the Rage Against the War Machine rally. I felt like that was a huge turning point for not only the Libertarian Party, which I've just been begging for that for a long time, but also the anti-war movement at large, which has kind of been lulled to sleep over the past 10, 12 years maybe. And it felt great, man. So what were your vibes that day? You gave a great speech, and Ron Paul was there with us. So, I mean, right off the bat, we're winning. So what do you think?
You just said it all right there. I mean, Ron Paul headlined, and that could really sum up the entire event, the greatness of the whole thing. It was just perfect. I mean, my fear was that no one was going to come. It wouldn't be, I don't know the first thing about, how to publicize a big event and have the public come to it. You know what I mean? Throwing a metal show or whatever it is. I have no idea how to make that happen. And I was afraid that somehow that would not be made to happen. I was not so much concerned about, whether any of the speeches would go bad or anything like that. I figured it'd be fine. And it was. And then the crowd turned out. It was, I don't know, somewhere like 2,000 or 3,000 people. I think probably 2. I don't really know. I mean, I've been at some crowds and heard some estimates before. I'm kind of rule of thumb on it sort of thing. But I'd say there's like 2,000, which is plenty. And, it may have been more than that considering like the length of the march to the White House, which of course, like wasn't even everybody. A lot of people probably just left from the Lincoln Memorial. But then all day long, I mean, the energy was absolutely great. Like there were no snafus or hiccups or screw ups or anything. Everyone's speech was great. I'm not a fan of the LaRouche. Someone invited the lady from the LaRouche group, but she didn't say anything crazy. As far as I know, I didn't listen to the entire thing, but I just heard her slamming Truman for nuking Nagasaki. So fine with me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there was nothing negative about it. People went, oh, some boohoo fest about the flags or whatever. Instead, what I saw was the very best progressives and socialists teaming up with libertarians in order to do the right thing and oppose the worst thing. And, so for people not familiar, myself, Dan McAdams, Dan McKnight, Gerald Celente, and Ron Paul. I think that's how we got. Somebody kicked me. I'm so sorry if I missed anyone, but I believe that's who was holding it down for the libertarians. And virtually everybody else there was like a leftist speaker. And, for people who are concerned about that, I mean, I just say, like, turn your frown upside down, man. I mean, the deal is you can't get rid of the left. The left is part of America. And, the question is, they're always going to be pressuring the liberals, who are the ones with actual power, right? Sort of more the center left Democrat types. The leftists are always going to be pressuring them. But to do what? Pressuring them to, cut every boy's balls off or, whatever crazy thing. Or, maybe to stop a war. So if we can befriend them enough, work with them enough to help them prioritize the right thing. And like our magic wish would be if we could somehow get them back to 2005, back before Pelosi took the House and the, I forgot who it was Schumer, I guess, and then took the Senate in 2006. It wasn't even Obama. It was before Obama. It was 2006. Once the Democrats, climbed on Cindy Sheehan's back into power, in the House and Senate, that was when the Democratic Party betrayed the anti-war movement. And then, of course, Obama just, dug it into the ground with his heel. But the thing of it is, Joe Biden's no Barack Obama. Like, if you think about people chanting, hey, hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today? Like, they probably wouldn't have done that to JFK, right? But LBJ, sure. Same kind of thing here, right? They're going to give Obama a pass, but why give Joe Biden a pass? And I get it. They're like, yeah, okay, Vladimir Putin's a conservative. And so he's sort of like a stand-in for Trump for a while or whatever. I mean, the truth of the matter is that most American liberals and progressives and leftists, I mean, they can be whipped into shape to support Obama or at least turn a blind eye to Obama. But are they really warmongers and interventionists at heart? I mean, I don't know. You look at how a lot of them are behaving over this Ukraine thing. It's pretty crazy, I admit. But I just
It took
think
some time, but I think they're getting close. It's been curated over some
yeah, I
time.
mean, but there's people getting burnt out on it too. You know what I mean? Where they're like, okay, I put a flag in my bio at first, but now I wonder how dangerous is this going to get? You know what I mean? And as longer it goes on, the more critics they have a chance to hear about, how this thing really got started and the level of danger that we're all in because of it and that kind of thing. So, and then you have more and more, just like you did have with Obama years, but even more now, you have conservatives looking at Joe Biden and saying, I'm not following this commander in chief into war. He's no commander in chief of mine. I'm not signing up my son for his military to go do some crazy thing like fight the Russians over there. It's sort of like the spirit of the Republican Party against Kosovo. Bill Kristol and the neoconservatives, John McCain and those guys really pushed for Kosovo in '99. There were a lot of Republicans, in the Congress, in the House and the Senate, who were like, we should not be doing this. What are we doing starting this war? And it was, Bill Clinton's nobody to believe in if you lean right at all. You know what I mean? So that has a lot to do with it. But so I just think that and look, I'm from Austin. What can I say? Like, I've grown up around left wingers and right wingers my whole life. I'm supposed to be afraid of getting their cooties on me. I live in a world of conservatives and liberals and worse, right? Socialists and hard right wingers, and who knows? So I'm not so much worried about associating with people who said something I disagree with or some kind of thing, because as a libertarian, I think our best hope is, obviously we want to convert more and more libertarians all the time, and we want to make America a more libertarian place to live in. But the means to that end, really, I think we have to accept that most right wingers and left wingers, they're only going to move so far. They already have decided who they are. And I think that, like Ron Paul did, he said, this is not a quote, this is me, paraphrasing. If you like your identity, you can keep it. Right? I'm not asking you to move left and become a hippie or become Michael Moore, the big fat communist hypocrite millionaire, or Jane Fonda on the North Vietnamese anti-aircraft gun, which was they kind of tricked her into that. It's not really fair anyway. But anyway, I'm not asking you to move left. I'm just telling you, you don't have to believe in this crap anymore. And so I think there's a huge opportunity for libertarians to instruct the right that, like, hey, you're right about this. Look at how bad this war is. Look at just how much we should not be doing this. And now is the time to really try to get through to them on that. And especially it makes a big difference in this election season. Donald Trump has figured out, even though he killed hundreds of thousands of people while he was president, especially in Afghanistan and in Yemen. But he is decided. This is, and it's true, this is DeSantis's weakness. DeSantis is really a George W. Bush guy, a hawk on everything. And so Trump has decided he's going to attack DeSantis and the rest of them too, Nikki Haley and all these people and look, we're talking about Donald Trump, so we can't just say, geez, I think your foreign policy is a little bit reckless, right? He speaks only in the most hyperbolic kind of a way. So he just absolutely is going off against them, but the policy. And I think this is such a huge opportunity because, look, I took social psychology for one semester in junior college. And so I think that the world revolves all around it. That's the way I look at all this stuff. And Donald Trump is saying it's okay, right-wing tough guy, for you to not believe in this crap anymore. It's not Democrat wimps and Republican tough guys. It's crazy Democrats, reckless, stupid, spendthrift Democrats, interventionist Democrats versus smart, thoughtful, conservative, penny pinching, republic protecting conservatives, right? That's how it's got to be, right? And so we got to work with the left and get them to be as good as we can. And we got to work with the right and have them prioritize and adopt our policies on as much as we can as well, and try to move everything forward. So, not to spill the beans or what, I don't think there's really any beans. It's only a proposal, but I believe what we're going to try to do is host another rally just like the one we just did. Only this time, instead of aligning with the left, this time we're going to bring out a bunch of right wingers. And
now you're in trouble. You're in trouble now.
And do
it's funny you mentioned that.
do the same damn thing. Because I think, yeah, people might get mad, but like, I mean, seriously, here's the thing. You guys remember when Biden sent, I don't even know who, some staffer from the NSC, I guess, to Capitol Hill to kill the Yemen resolution. Everybody blamed Bernie. It was really
Right.
Biden that did it. Bernie was the one who wanted to do it. Now, of course, he is a weak, you know, he's Bernie Sanders. So he just gave right in and didn't even host the debate and have the vote and lose. He's like gave right in at the beginning of the night. And it was such a letdown. But truth be told, it was, you know, Biden's responsibility for coming and killing that thing. Sanders thought he had the votes. That was why he pushed it. He thought he was going to pass it. But the president came and said, and took his fucking, took his margin away. But anyway, then a bunch of people got mad and said, yeah, Horton promised that this was our magic wish, dream come true, and it was going to 100% definitely work. And then it turned out that it didn't. And so, you know, isn't everybody an idiot for listening to Horton and trying to call their congressman and call their senator and work on this at all? And my answer to that is, well, then you don't know the first thing about the Yemen war then. Because if you did know about it, then you might wonder why you're not laying on the train tracks, preventing the missiles from getting to the ship to go over there to help the Saudis kill these people. You might wonder why we're not all on general strike until we have a final peace settlement and end of that war. The war in Yemen is a genocide, and it is winding up now. I don't want to be too hyperbolic about the current circumstance. We're on, you know, month 11 of a 2-month ceasefire now, and it's pretty much holding, and the Saudis and the Houthis are finally talking. So it is progress, but hundreds of thousands of people, well over 500,000. And I'm afraid that when they do the real count of the excess death rate, you're going to find something near 1 million Yemenis have been killed in this war since Obama gave the green light to Saudi and UAE and AQAP to start this war back in 2015. So we have to try, right? What are you going to do? There's a war powers resolution, and we're going to not do everything we can to support it when the alternative is letting the Saudis know that you guys can do whatever you want. We got your back. We'll pay your way. We'll give you all the bombs you need, and we'll cover for you in the UN, and you can have another 8 years of killing these people if you want. Is that the message we want to send? As the people of this country, 300 something million of us, we can't scare up enough of a group of leftists and libertarians to care about the Yemen war to make them stop. You know, it should be that we can. It should be that you get your Facebook group, and you get your Facebook group, and you get your Facebook group, and we figure out how to get, you know, a wave of energy powerful enough that Congress knows that they have to do what we say on this. And there's, of course, it's no silver bullet. It's not, I never said it was a magic wish or it was definitely going to work. I just said that it's the best opportunity that we have, and we absolutely have to take it. And it's the same thing with what we're talking about with this thing in Ukraine. You know, like, take the analogy. Let's say Vietnam before they sent a bunch of troops, but it's just advisors and weapons that's going to South Vietnam. You see how a bunch of people say, that's fine, that's good. Help those South Vietnamese defend from those communists, whatever. Never even mind the slippery slope of getting our troops in there and all that. But let's just say we're talking about early 60s Vietnam, right? If you look at the map, you can see where Vietnam has an entire China between them and Russia, right? So even though the Russians were backing, I think more than the Chinese were, the Russians were backing the Vietnamese communists. At the same time, if we had completely defeated them, the Russians didn't really care. You know what I mean? This is a way for them to wage like a proxy war, like we're doing now, try to bleed us dry and laugh and support their friend. But the consequences for them, if they had lost in Vietnam, right? If Dr. Manhattan had come and blasted everybody and taken over the North, right? The consequences for the Soviet Union were nothing. They didn't care. Okay. Right now, we're fighting a war just like that, right on their border, right on their on their western border. And if you have a picture of Russia in your head there, or the shape of Ukraine on the map with Belarus and all that, you know, it cuts in. This is Ukraine, and Russia cuts in. So Kharkiv is 300 miles basically due south of Moscow. This is right there. And that's, you know, from here to Oklahoma City. I'm from Austin. Mm-hmm. There's nothing. And so, it's waging, it's increasing the danger and increasing the tension between the United States and Russia to just an absolutely unacceptable degree. And I know that everybody on TV says that, yeah, no, this is great, and we totally should be doing this, and that's the consensus. And so, you can't be too alarmist and say how, oh, it's so dangerous or whatever, when, geez, all these know-it-alls on TV think it's fine. But the reality is that something like this, I mean, look, when I was a kid, I told my dad, geez, I think there's going to be a nuclear war. And my dad said, look, I'm no Ronald Reaganite. And I think he's pretty reckless, and he's heightening tensions rather than ramping them down. But he doesn't want a war. He's trying to prevent one the best way he knows how anyway. And the Russians don't want a war either. Nobody wants to start setting off H-bombs. That's stupid. I'm saying that. But I'm also saying that it's still within the realm of possibility. And you're just fooling yourself if you think it's not. That like somehow this nuclear taboo is, again, a magic wish guaranteed to prevent something from happening. Well, that's not how it is. And when the level of tension is this high, it's essentially equivalent or worse to the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. I mean, we didn't have a hot war in Cuba. We could have. But imagine if we had been, the Russians were pouring in, money and weapons for the Cubans to fight the American army on the ground, or the American Marine Corps on the ground in Cuba, and laughing about it and keeping it going at the expense of our guys just off our shore like that. I mean, JFK would have started a thermonuclear war over that. I mean, look how close he got to starting one over, you better stop installing these missiles. That's non-negotiable. Get these missiles out of here right now and all of that. I mean, it came right down to it. That's the level of tension that they're putting us in. Joe Biden gets up there and says, listen, we're closer to Armageddon than any time since 1962. Correctly implying there for you to infer that if there's a nuclear war at all, it's going to be everything we got. 1,500 deployed on our side versus 1,500 deployed on their side, and probably break out the storage and launch a few thousand more after that until we're all dead. It'll be the end of the world. The end of the world. It'll be every major city, every military base, and eventually every major city in America and in Russia and in Europe cooked. 1 billion dead off the bat. 60 million was the casualties from World War II. That'll be how many people die in the first couple of hours of a thermonuclear war between America and Russia. And these people think they have the right. Joe Biden gets to get up there and say we're at the edge of Armageddon, but it's all the other guy's fault though, and damn him, and he better stop, and that's it. And he's not even trying to send his Secretary of State to go and negotiate an end to this thing. They brag openly, no, we want to keep this thing going as long as we can. We want the Russians to go bankrupt and withdraw. But you guys have seen, you guys already know. I don't even have to tell you. Everybody already knows. The economic war didn't work. The ruble's been bolstered. All the war has been great for the oil price if you're selling it. And as we push them towards Asia, they've made smart deals with China, with India, and whoever else across Asia. And they've made up for it. Their economy is not suffering. And frankly, we are paying one way or the other. The American people are subsidizing the Russians' cost of the war. We're still buying oil from them. Our allies in Europe are still buying gas from them. And so
the money doesn't stop moving, right?
I'm sorry.
The money never stops moving.
That's right. I mean,
the money changers will keep that going.
Yeah, there will be, people put their thumb on this scale and that one in different levels of sanctions and this and that. But yeah, it's, life finds a way. Right. And so, their whole thing. Yeah, no, this is going to destroy the Russian economy. Yeah, well, maybe eventually. After how many years of this? They're not a communist country anymore. Right. So it's not that they're the richest in the world. They've got an economy the size of like Italy. But I don't know. Italy's a first world nation state in Western Europe. They're doing all right. You know what I mean? Like you could say that in a way to diminish them, or you could go, they have an economy as powerful as Italy. That's enough to crank out tanks and artillery tubes and infantrymen. You know, what are we talking about? And they have a much bigger population as far as just filling infantry roles. So, and you have in the war a situation where the Americans admit themselves that, look, if we did what it took, if we assume the manpower on the Ukrainian side for the sake of argument, if we gave them everything that they needed to really defeat Russia, say, I don't know, jets, bombers, massive fleets of tanks and missiles and rocket artillery and whatever, we give them everything they needed. Well, that could cause a real war with Russia. That would be calling the Russians bluff, like way over the line. Backing the Ukrainians in war is one thing, but to Russia's ultimate, total, humiliating defeat, that's not the policy. You understand? That's not the policy. The policy is we're going to wear them down till eventually they leave. Yeah. We're going to give them, as Biden said, we don't think that Ukraine needs F-16s right now. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying give them F-16s, but I'm illustrating Biden's policy. If he gave them F-16s, that might tip the balance, sake of argument. Biden's saying, I don't want to tip the balance. I want to keep it like this.
I just saw Dana Bash asked Anthony Blinken that on CNN the other day too. He's talking about how important it is to keep funding them. And she was like, so just say if what the Ukrainians needed to satisfy them was that they needed what it took to take back Crimea and call it theirs too. And even he was like, I don't know if we want to, not quite.
That's right. He goes, no, this is a red line. But then Victoria Nuland, who supposedly works for him, says, oh, yeah, we'll help him retake Crimea. This is Robert Kagan's wife, the lady who helped to orchestrate the coup in 2014, who is on the phone call talking with her buddy, Jeffrey Pyatt, as they agree. We got to glue it. We got to make it sail. We got to midwife this thing. We have to make it all work before Putin can find a way to fight back. We're going to get away with it. Fist bump. And then they didn't get away with nothing. Look at what's happened. Hundreds of thousands. Well, first of all, 14,000 people were killed from the time of the coup until the outbreak of the real war. And then since the real war, we've got at least, 7,000 to 10,000 civilian casualties and probably more than 100,000 on both sides. I mean, they're vastly overestimating the number of Russian casualties in this thing. I think everyone can tell. Like, yeah, we killed 1,000 Russians today. Really? Man, that's a lot. That's like 1,000. How'd you do that? And like, you know what I mean? Anyway, but still, it's absolute devastation for this country and for the population, for the people there, and tens of millions of refugees. The country just completely destroyed. And it's just, I don't know, man. I understand that I'm the guy from Antiwar.com, and I'm an anti-government libertarian guy, and I just got finished complaining about the terror wars for 20 years, and I got this bias. I'm not the most objective source for looking at this kind of thing, I guess, but I really am just beside myself that they did not really try to prevent this war from breaking out. They were willing to tell Putin, you better not, but they were not willing to negotiate in good faith to prevent the war from happening, because they thought at least 49% that, like, good, go ahead and let them invade. We'll give them an Afghanistan. We'll bog them down. We'll bleed them dry, force them out the hard way. Like, we just helped Osama do to us, replicating what we helped him do to the Soviets back in the 80s, which was replicating what the Soviets had helped the Vietnamese do to us in the 60s.
I don't know, Scott. I think Victoria Nuland, the Democrats' own Liz Cheney, would disagree with you.
Bruce,
check this out.
Like you, I am, and I think the administration is very gratified to know that Nord Stream 2 is now, as you like to say, a hunk of metal at the bottom of the sea. Mm-hmm. I personally, having been involved, along with my boss, Secretary Blinken, in all of those negotiations with Russia to try to prevent this war in December, do not believe that had that Nord Stream 2 been cut off in January, that would have been decisive for Putin. It was important that the day the war began, the Germans cut the pipeline, as did the rest of the Europeans, but he was bound and determined to go into Ukraine, as you know.
So you believe...
So how much of that was bullshit? Like 90%, 95%? What?
Well, context is everything. I mean, first of all, I have to say, can you imagine being Robert Kagan and being in love with that woman? It's just incredible. You remember George Carlin said, Wait, do we say bad words on this show?
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah.
George Carlin said about Dan Quayle's wife. He goes, "Where'd he find her, at a Halloween party or something?"
Yeah. Look at Fauci's wife, Bush Senior's
let
wife.
me
There's
ask you
definitely a
something.
common
Does
theme.
he actually have to fuck that woman? Anyway,
Yep.
good old Carlin. He sets the precedent. He makes it okay to say. Listen, no. So she's horrible. Look, this is all. Look, but if she's saying our threat in December, that if you invade, we're going to shut down the pipeline, was not enough of a threat to prevent him from invading, then yes, that's clearly true. Right? But so what? I mean, she's trying to make it sound like, yeah, because that's how he is. When she's really illustrating what I was just claiming, which is that they were willing to tell the Russians, if you do this or else, right? We're going to cut off your pipeline. We're going to put on all these sanctions. We're going to do all these things. We're going to send in arms to Ukraine and do everything we can to make your life miserable. They were not willing. And as they bragged about, they admitted that they were not willing whatsoever to negotiate neutrality or even to discuss neutrality for Ukraine, of any sort of freeze on NATO expansion further east. Or even, the proposal was that you guys abide by Bill Clinton's promise from 1997 in the U.S. Russia Founding Act, or the NATO Russia Council Founding Act, that we're not deploy military equipment on a permanent basis into the new Eastern European countries, which is, of course, exactly what we're doing. And I don't know if you guys remember this, but a year ago when Putin was saying, hey, man, you guys need to pull your military forces, your Western European military forces back into Western Europe, the other side of the line, like in Bill Clinton's promise from 1997, they just laughed in his face. They treated that, and they talked about it on TV news here. Like, this is the most absurd thing in the world. 1997? Like, that's 1897. That's ancient history and doesn't mean anything. And by the way, that promise was, I have the quote here, that promise was made to be broken. And Bill Clinton laughed later and mocked them and said, oh, yeah, no, we promised to not to move our military equipment into Eastern Europe until we wake up one morning and decide that we want to. That's Bill Clinton for you right there, admitting, just like Bush Sr. before him and W. Bush after him, that these promises are all made to be broken. It's all just, whatever we have to tell the Russians to get them to acquiesce to what we're doing right now. And then we'll, stick it in their face and then move on to the next thing, and they've done it all this time. It's crazy, man. And look, here's the thing of it too. You can see how the argument works. Aren't you guys from here? I'm from here. So are you on the side of the other guy, the bad guy in the big fight against your own side? And that's all it takes, right? Is this like childish level, stupid thing where, like, in reality, if I asked you, are you Bill Clinton? Have you been to Jeffrey Epstein's island? Did you get paid $300,000 to give a speech to Goldman Sachs, or was it Citigroup, one day after leaving the presidency? Are you a face-biting rapist? Did you kill all those Branch Davidians? No, that was him that did that. That was Bill Clinton. So if I tell you, look, Bill Clinton had this Middle East policy that said we're going to bomb Iraq every other day for 8 years straight from bases on the Holy Arabian Peninsula. And if that gets us attacked, downtown New York, I guess. If I told you that same guy had a policy that said, yeah, we're just going to expand our military alliance into Eastern Europe, right up to Russia's border. And we're going to lie right to their face and promise them that, no, promises. And then we're just going to do whatever we want anyway. And then if I told you that W. Bush and Obama and Trump continued all those same policies and into the Biden years, that's what led to this. Is that really that much of a surprise? The same guy that caused September 11th is the same guy that caused the war in Ukraine. Knocked me over with a feather. Bill Clinton, the guy who rode on Epstein's plane to Thailand numerous times. And we all know what that means. That's who Bill Clinton is. And so it shouldn't have to offend your patriotic sensibilities, like you or your dad, to say that, like, look, Bill Clinton, W. Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, John McCain, these men made mistakes. These men are not the United States of America. They're just the people who happen to be in power. And look at the things that they did. It's crazy. Donald Trump had American army forces parading and doing exercises in Latvia right on the Russian border, like 300 yards from the Russian border. You can see it from here. And we're doing exercises there. Now, is that to defend from Russia, or that's simply a provocation against Russia? The kind of thing that would make them think, man, we really need to revisit our Latvia policy. It's the most obvious thing in the world. But you're just supposed to have as this religious sort of doctrine, never put your shoe on the other foot. Never stop and think about it from the other guy's point of view at all. That itself would be treason. Because if you just stop and take a look at it, then you go, oh, yeah, Bill Clinton, the guy that burned all those little babies to death in Waco, Texas, 100 miles up the road from here, is the same guy who also had an expansionist policy in Eastern Europe, despite Boris Yeltsin on his knees begging, don't do this, Bill. You're going to cause a war, man. You're drawing new dividing lines in Europe. You're setting us right back where we were. What the hell are you doing? Please stop. And he did it anyway. And W. Bush comes in. He adds 9 more countries to NATO, including the Baltic states right on Russia's border, leaving their military port at Kaliningrad behind NATO lines, separating, by land, like if in the history before World War II, where the Germans wanted access to the city of Danzig that was under the control of the Poles. It was their city, and they wanted a corridor, and Hitler was willing to plunge the entire world into war to get his damn corridor. Well, that's the situation here. We cut Kaliningrad off from Russia. And look, it was already on the other side of Latvia, but now, Lithuania and Poland, Belarus and Lithuania. But now we brought Lithuania into our military alliance. So now it's not just this geographical separation. Now it's, as Pat Buchanan put it, behind NATO lines from a Russian point of view. And you guys might remember last spring, the Lithuanians were saying, hey, we're just enforcing EU sanctions. And they don't even have a corridor. They have a railway that runs from Russia through Belarus and Lithuania to Kaliningrad. And the Lithuanians started stopping the trains from going, or inspecting and refusing to allow certain goods to go, and this kind of thing. And the Russians started getting really mad immediately, and the EU told the Lithuanians, no, you guys shouldn't do that. Go ahead and let them have their railway here. But you see how that could change, right? Another errant missile. Remember Ukraine? An errant missile hit a farmhouse in Poland and killed a couple of people, and everybody completely flipped out. Well, what if that really had been a Russian missile that had been, accidentally gone off course and killed a couple of Poles on Polish soil? You could see how some bureaucrat immediately would say, let's cut off Kaliningrad. That'll be our response, right? This kind of thing. And these are all just tripwires for war. And it's just, when after World War II and they started the Cold War, they said, listen, if, Harry Truman and his government and the Republicans too, they said, listen, if we were just talking about the Russian Empire in Eastern Europe, tough. Those are just the breaks. You know what I mean? Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus, Ukraine, they're going to be under Russian influence. Even the Poles and the Romanians, I don't know. But this is different. This is special. This is communism. And the Soviet Communist Empire, that ain't just the Russian Empire. And of course, after all, after World War II, they'd taken all of Eastern Europe, So, but it's this ideology of global conquest in the name of liberation and revolution. And enslaving mankind, and we have to contain them, and we have to hold the line. And so, just as they said before the war, now not just France, but Germany is America's eastern frontier, and we will not let the Soviet menace grow and all these kinds of things. Well, fine, but that was over 30 years ago. Soviet Union ceased to exist. And they did kind of try to hold on to the last republics, but it all just fell apart from, after the failed coup of August 1991. That was it, man. The whole thing just fell apart. Christmas Day 1991, they brought the red flag down over the Kremlin, put up the red, white, and blue. And now look at Putin. Is he a ruthless killer and a strongman and a warlord and all these things? Yeah, sure. But he's got a high approval rating and he keeps running for election. So he's not exactly a dictator. But the real point is he's a conservative Republican, right? He's not a fascist. He has fascists to his right, very real right wingers in his country, that he's not one. But he is essentially, a Buchananite, right? He's like a somewhat right wing, fairly conservative Republican, I guess, on the scale, to the right, somewhat of a nationalist. And,
that exposes him. That would expose the agenda, right? So it's not about the ideology.
I know.
It's not about communism. It's about, sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah. I'm sorry. My train of thought there. Just the point is that so you could see why. So for liberals and leftists, that makes for a good official enemy because they hate conservative Republicans so much, or this or that. But I'm just saying it makes a pretty thin stand-in for the Soviet Empire under Joseph Stalin.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where it's just, we essentially have right-wing Christian corporatist Republicans here in America. There's nothing about, Russia that is, that alien to our system. That's you know what I mean? It's a contest for influence over Germany.
That's what I was just. Is it just about the economics for 100 years? And is that why it comes down to the Nord Stream pipeline? Which is, I definitely want to talk about that while you're here.
I mean, that is, look, yes, it's true. It's just, and it depends on your perspective too, right? I mean, I feel this way about religious wars, that all religious wars are really just politics and then, dressed up in religion, right? So I think, ultimately the world wars and the current war are essentially about preventing Germany and Russia from combining together into this major power, preventing Germany from being so dominant in Eastern Europe that they can keep Britain and America and I guess France out, right? And so especially if Germany and Russia have an alliance together, then we're completely frozen out of Eastern European markets and whatever power and influence. And then so if you listen to Brzezinski tell it, then you have all these pivot points from Ukraine to Uzbekistan to Afghanistan to world rule. And they really do think of it, the whole thing, like a game of chess. I mean, if you read, it's called The Grand Chessboard. It's one of Brzezinski's books. And they really do treat it all like it's this zero-sum game and that, it's all going to be just total domination by one power or the other at any given time. There's no ebb and flow. There's no trade-offs. There's no mutually beneficent exchanges, right? Okay, I'm a Texan, but I don't have investments in natural gas, right? So maybe my local economy is somewhat dependent on natural gas revenues helping to boost us on the margin, by some percent. But you look at a pipeline between Russia and Germany, with the Russians selling billions of dollars worth of natural gas to Germany every year. I look at that as an investment in the future of humanity. And I look at the cost in terms of profits for Texans as not counting at all. At all. I don't care how many billions of dollars they're losing. Screw them. I want Russian and German economic interdependence. If Britain or America stands to lose in terms of access to markets in certain industries, I just don't care about that. The last two times that Russia and Germany fought, it was the worst thing that ever happened. The last time was 60 million people were killed in that thing, and that includes in the Pacific as well. But still, in the European theaters, something like 35, 40 million people died. It's just unbelievable grief. People are too far removed now from World War II to understand the absolute level of devastation. And of course, with nuclear weapons, it blows all that completely away. So I just think that it's a matter of perspective. Senator Paul gave a speech where he essentially politely pinned this all on Ted Cruz. Like, Ted Cruz is this corrupt Texas senator who's representing these, and that's his friend, by the way, presumably, but he's representing these corrupt gas interests. They want to export liquefied natural gas to Germany. And if they can cut Russia out, good. We see what a tiny, parochial, narrow little financial interest that is versus the interests of all of humanity in making sure that Germany and Russia get along. And I really think that you're onto it, man, that this is like the core of this argument, is that Angela Merkel and Putin had this plan for what they called Eurasian home, which was sort of a take on Mikhail Gorbachev and Boris Yeltsin's common European home, that they called it back then, where it's essentially attempting to integrate Russia deeper and better into Western Europe and Eastern European and Western European economies. And so from this side of the Atlantic, or even this side of the English Channel, that's a threat to them. And they're not willing to zoom out and look at it like, yeah, but isn't that what we want, is to have, and especially, isn't that what they want? These American, New World globalists, isn't this their whole
That was going to be my question.
Want these borders to be more or less meaningless in order to encourage this kind of world trade and capital flows and everything freely around the world? Have they given up on their own world order? But see, that's the whole thing, right? They never meant all that. All that is just for them, but not for others. If there's a way to prevent a free trade agreement between Russia and China, they do that, or between Russia and Germany. They'll get in the way if they can.
Dan, do you have a question, dude?
You just answered it. I was going to say, you're talking about Texans. I was wondering if you thought this whole thing was inevitable, this whole conflict from the beginning, because the only reason I had ever heard of Nord Stream 2 before any of this started was from years ago. Ted Cruz was railing against that thing with Chris Coons and everybody else, talking about how, we can't allow Russia the power to do this. So that was like 2019, I think. I feel like this was already in place.
This is just totally a politician talking, right? That, if Russia's selling all this gas to Europe, then that means Europe is their hostage and they control them, use it as a whip and a leash and all this, right? Instead of going, that's great. The Germans will get all the heat and energy that they need, and the Russians will be so invested in peace with Germany, they'll tread more carefully. Not they'll be able to get away with murder. Now they have a license to kill because Germany's so dependent on them. But they're dependent on the Germans too now. Their revenue depends on the Germans too. As Seymour Hersh pointed out, I'm not sure if this is in his essay. I think it is. He mentioned on my show that, I think it is in the essay, that I'm sorry, I forget the number. It was some huge number, billions of dollars, some giant. And, Gazprom, the Russian gas company, is owned by the Russian government, at least in major part. So you're talking about revenue directly to Putin's national state. They have every interest in the world, not in cynically exploiting the Germans, but in getting along with them. It's when America goes, we're going to stop this damn thing, and you have everything to lose anyway. You might as well go for it. You know what I mean? That he would go ahead and cost himself the pipeline. Obviously he's got higher interests in Ukraine than just keeping the pipeline going with Germany if it comes down to it, the way that the Americans framed it. But it just seems to me, as Bastiat said, where goods do not cross borders, soldiers will. So, we just want the opposite of that. And, but, the Americans, remember after the crash of 2008 and John McCain goes, well, I don't really know anything about economics. I only know about politics, but I'm reading Alan Greenspan's book. He's like, yeah, so this is the, Greenspan that caused the bubble, that caused the crash. This is after the crash. He's like, yeah, I'm trying to find out what's going on by reading The Maestro by Bob Woodward, all about Greenspan's success. But you can see how that guy lived his entire life, not understanding what a market force was or what any kind of demand curve meant or any kind of thing his entire life long. You'd only see everything as a zero-sum game. And even if you take Ted Cruz out of the equation, or take any particular oil lobby or, gas lobbyist group or whatever out of the equation. From the point of view of the Americans, if the other guys are doing good, we're losing. They don't look at it like what a wonderful, healthy global economy that everybody's getting so rich. In fact, people criticize Steven Pinker and even Jeffrey Tucker and people for saying that the world is getting so much better in so many ways. Poverty, hunger, real starvation has been almost obliterated from the planet. There's still some hunger, but it's far less than before. I mean, if you just go back 20 years, the statistics for the poorest people in the world and their quality of life are just,
That's why they did the Great Reset, so they could check that whole shit and reshuffle the chessboard, man.
Yeah, I mean, you might think so, right? That they don't want that, or they don't see, or at the same time, they use that as the excuse for what they're doing. They give themselves all the credit. Yeah, it was the IMF that forced all those reforms on those poor economies that made them lower their taxes and have better performing economies. There's like some truth in that, right? But then you can see how they're like, damn, because they don't want these countries to be wealthy enough to be independent. And, there's this great
domination.
There's this interview. Oh, you guys might be familiar with this private security company called Stratfor.
Yeah, Nick Sarwark got the newsletter from the, remember that?
Got their newsletter. That's right.
We like that story.
He's not their informant. I hate that guy, but he doesn't work for him. I know people say that, but so listen, their president, basically it's a private, security company. They call themselves a private CIA. They're basically an intelligence firm that consults with big business. And I guess they do some dirty tricks and stuff sometimes too. But very, very connected guy.
How private do you think it is? Don't you think that's something that an intelligence agency would do, is have a private agency to do the things it couldn't do governmentally?
I don't know. I don't know if it's actually a spinoff of the CIA itself. I think probably not, but it's, close enough. And I mean, they consult directly with government agencies too. And you can read on their site. I've read things on their site before where they talk about, like, I just got back from the Pentagon and this is what they told me. Oh, about backing the terrorists in Syria. I have that in the book. Stuff like that. So they are, very, very connected. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so George Freeman, you might have heard this before. He gave a interview with Kommersant, the Russian outlet, in, I'm going to say, November or December of 2014, the same year as the coup, but at the end of the year. I think it was 2015. I mean, pardon me. I think it was December is what I meant to say. 2014. And you might have heard this because there's one famous quote out of it. He says it was the most blatant coup in world history in regards to the Maidan overthrow in February of 2014. And in fact, the follow-up question is, are you talking about what the Nazis did that morning or that night, or are you talking about the whole thing? And he goes, oh no, the whole thing. It was all a put on by, look at all the money the Americans were pouring in. All right. So yeah, he got that right for sure. It's that same interview. If anybody wants to find it, it's the most blatant coup in world history. Those are your search terms. And you can read this whole interview. And what he says in there, he's very amoral about it. And he's explaining to the Russian interviewer, like, look, you don't understand how this works, but let me just explain how this works. When Iran starts getting a little bit ahead, you hit them. And when the Russians start making a little bit more money, you hit them. When China's doing a little bit better, you hit them. You keep them off balance. You cost them money. You give them problems. Mm-hmm. You get in their way. That's the way the game is played. It's all against all. Be a dick. Always.
Mafia tactics.
Good sportsmanship. Mm-hmm. No good faith. You don't honor your deals. You see how the Americans break every treaty and every deal that they make. They don't give a damn. They just betray whatever the last president promised. The next president's going to kill that guy. And we see this over and over again. And because that's how they look at it. It's all purely zero-sum game. Our empire versus their empire. They don't look at it like, great, Russia and China and everybody are getting rich. And yeah, okay, so that means that their politicians have a little bit bigger britches now and whatever. And so we have to deal with them, maybe in a little slightly more conciliatory way. But isn't it great that the populations of their countries are doing so much better and that mankind in the 21st century is like achieving a state where like virtually no one starves to death anymore? where I saw a thing the other day, and who knows these stats? I don't know. But I saw a thing that said, yeah, we got 8 billion people now, and we got terrible like weather. I don't know, like if there are more natural disasters than before, but the casualty rate from natural disasters is like just through the floor. Because now we can tell people to evacuate when there's a giant storm coming, and we can, transport people in massive numbers, to higher ground if there's a flood or, whatever the thing is. We have all these ways. We build our structures to be earthquake resistant and all these kinds of things. And so here we have so many more people, and yet we're less vulnerable to the ravages of nature than ever before. Like, mankind is getting our act together in the private sphere, right? I guarantee you somewhere there's a Lou Rockwell essay that says exactly this, right? You look at how good mankind is doing and then compare that to what our governments are doing and what they would have us do to each other. And what a bloody dishonest bunch of monsters they are, the lengths that they will go to prevent people from doing good. Germany and Russia want a new Eurasian home. We have to stop them. Who talks like that? A bad guy, right?
Yep.
It's like that. There's a video last night on my Twitter feed of these cops killing this lady. Did you see it?
No.
It's this old lady. She's not even that old. She's like 60 years old. She's in Knoxville, Tennessee. Word up, Mr. Mayor. She is discharged from the hospital, even though she's had a stroke before, and she's like probably, I think, in the middle of having a stroke right now. She's clearly like very overweight and has a broken ankle, so she cannot walk. They're kicking her out with no wheelchair, so the hospital's responsibility is everything. But then, and you guys can watch this on my Twitter feed, then the cops just treat this lady absolutely like garbage, dude. Like she's not that even this person would deserve it, but they treat her like she's completely filthy, smelly, drunken, bum, loser, homeless person, gross person they don't want to touch. That's not true at all. Right? Like she's just some lady, and they treat her just like absolute garbage, and end up and she's just begging the whole time. And I even like transcribed on the Twitter the whole time. Every word out of her mouth is, "Please, sir, I'm begging you. Please help me. I can't breathe. Will you please help me up? I'm so sorry. Can you please, 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 please?" And then their answers to her are, "Screw you, die. You're so gross. Oh, God, you got my uniform dirty. You get up. I know you're faking. Screw you. F you. Blah, blah, blah." The whole time, every word out of her mouth is like, "Hey." And every word out of their mouth is, "F you, die." And then they throw in the back of the truck, or back of the car, and they have the dash cam like facing back in the cop car. And she's going, "Please help me sit up. I can't sit up. Please help me sit up. I can't breathe." And he's like, "Yeah, right. You're a big, fat, stupid loser. I hate you. And you're faking it. And you're the one who laid down, and it's your fault." And then she just dies. You can hear her death gurgles as she suffocates to death in the back of this cop's car. She's having a stroke and dying. And she's begging, "Please, I'm dying. I'm dying." And so it's like, yeah, on one half, you have like this innocence and this like helplessness. And then on the other half, you have the security force. Her treating her like she's a convicted murderer. Like she puked on them. Like she did something to them. With just totally unnecessarily. It's such a disconnect. It's like, man, out of like all 7 of them, none of them were willing to like get down on one knee and talk to her for a second like a human being for one moment at all. The whole time? No. And that's, to me, is just such a perfect representation of government, dude. That's what happens when you get a government job, is you become a monster. You look at the world the way the worst kind of psychopath looks at the world. How can I inflict my power on these people? And, the self-righteousness is no different than ours, right? Except we're not hurting anybody. Right? We know we're doing the right thing. We're trying our best to tell the truth, to stick up for freedom and liberty and what's right and all this. Well, same as Antony Blinken, except that Antony Blinken's got a war going on that he is perpetuating in the name of all the same kind of things that we say are important, and because he can, right? They all do. R.W. Apple was one of the most famous and important New York Times reporters in a previous era in the 80s and 70s and 80s and 90s, I guess. And in the early 90s, when H.W. Bush bombed maybe it was Panama, when he did the regime change against Manuel Noriega in Panama, R.W. Apple said, this is a rite of passage for an American president to spill blood. This is what we do. Jeez. Remember when Trump bombed Syria and they went, Donald Trump became a president today, and all the media finally loved him. Yeah. It's a cult, man. It's,
the war culture has permeated, I mean, at least since 9/11, but probably since, at the beginning of Enough Already, but down to the warrior cop. Like, it's all military para-fascist forces, black tanks in your suburban areas, and that just fuck them up culture. Don't trust anybody. Don't trust your neighbor. Everybody's a suspect. It's fucking terrifying, man. You're absolutely, you nailed it.
And this is my gripe, right? Is it doesn't have to be this way. This is stupid. Why are we doing this? Ever since the end of the Cold War, you could have completely demilitarized. We got no enemies anywhere. Ron Paul said we could defend this country with a couple of good submarines, which, by the way, one Trident submarine could kill everybody in Europe. You understand that? One could end the world. So he's damn right about that. And I think he was just referring to the torpedoes would be enough to keep any foreign attacker's navy away. But like, it could also, a couple of good submarines could deter any power on Earth forever from attacking this country. If nuclear deterrence works, for the sake of argument, that's all you need. We don't need a standing army at all. We don't need a CIA. Hell, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who was an official neoconservative, he said, Cold War's over. Let's abolish the CIA. These guys are nothing but trouble. And there was like some momentum behind his bill for a little while there in the 90s. It ended up dying. But that was a conversation that the U.S. Senate was having. Maybe we don't need to have a CIA anymore. Why do we need to have a CIA now? That's, again, not antiwar.com. That's them saying that. That's right. Moynihan, the neocon, saying that. And so, when Bill Clinton expanded NATO, Brent Scowcroft, that worked for H.W. Bush, his right-hand man, said, you shouldn't be doing this. Him and Robert McNamara, that killed all those Vietnamese, and Paul Nitze, who said containment isn't enough, we need to roll back the Soviet Union. All of these hawks, after the Soviet Union fell, so we should not be doing this, man. What are we doing? I got a great quote from Zbigniew Brzezinski writing in Foreign Affairs in 1997, where he says, we must expand NATO and screw the Russians if they don't like it. And by the way, if you follow my advice, this could really have horrible consequences and could cause a war in Europe again and all these horrible things. So you better tread very, very carefully. Yep. That's the biggest proponent of it.
Yep.
You guys, is that car alarm coming in? Hope my mic was
a little bit. It's okay though. I barely heard it until you said something.
Here, let me close this window real quick. Oh, there it goes. Well, anyway.
Thanks, man.
So that's the thing of it, man, is if Ron Paul had won the election in 1988 and Harry Brown had won the election in 1996 and we'd had decent men, not even hardcore libertarians, but just decent men sitting in that chair since then, we'd be fine right now.
It makes me so angry to think about the lost potential.
That's right. Look, all that stuff that Pinker and Tucker say about how much better the world is, that's all in places where America's not killing the people, right? You look at the chaos in the world, virtually every single place, well, I should say every single, but probably 9 out of 10 of the major violent conflicts where people are being deprived to death and suffering through this kind of mass violence, it's the United States of America's fault. Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, of course, Libya, Syria, Yemen, and then, all into Mali, Sierra Leone, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Nigeria, and Chad. This is all the United States of America spread this chaos. This is George W. Bush and Barack Obama mostly who did this. And even in the Congo, where we don't have troops, we have interests and we have spies and we have favorites. The U.S. empire has been, and this is one where I've been negligent, but I have done a couple of interviews on it over the years, where even in the Congo, where you hear millions dying in these resource wars and all that, that's the American empire involved there too. And, you know, in the rest of the world, there are, you know, problems. There's ethnic strife in Myanmar and God knows what, you know, different things going on. Even then, I mean, that was, you know, Saudi Arabia, probably with America's blessing, backing jihadists there and picking a fight and getting the Muslims there all persecuted by the ruling clan or whatever, this kind of thing. So it's just, it's not to say that if America wasn't doing it, that no one else would cause any wars ever again or anything like that. But it's just, you got to recognize, again, even if you're from here, our government is run by some pretty lousy men, and they've done some pretty lousy things, you know. And I totally understand, because I'm from here. I was raised in American government schools. I was raised watching the Discovery Channel, you know, like I understand the point of view that, like, yeah, no, it's America versus the world. We have the Declaration of Independence. That means we have the right to live. We have the right to be free. The other people of the world, tough for them. And especially if they get in the way of our government, too bad. And God might have said, thou shalt not kill, but there's a loophole there, which is if the U.S. government tells you to kill somebody, you can kill all of them, and it don't matter. You can kill till you feel like you're done, as long as you're wearing olive green and you're following your orders from your country. They love, you could tell what liars they are right there. Serve your country. Come on. It's a government job. They have to dress up with these, right? Isn't that like if you took a advertising class, that's like glittering generality 101 or whatever, right? It's one of those slippery bait and switch type stupid things.
They get guys like Pat Tillman to sign up, sign their life away to go fight. Right.
That's right. Like what? There's a plot of land in the middle of Illinois. That is sent you off to war? No.
That's my favorite thing Ron Paul said the other day at that rally when he was talking about the draft too. He said, they don't need you to sign up for that thing. They know where you are all the time, always. It's to condition you when you're young, to put that into your mind that someday we might need you to do this.
That's exactly right.
And you're the one that signed the paper.
Yep. And look, I mean, speaking for myself, and I was born in the shadow of the Vietnam War, 76, you know, and I just, you know, grew up in all this stuff. And this was always at issue. Was that like, look, on one hand, obviously murder is murder. You can't kill nobody. And God said so. It's like rule number 3 or 4 on his list after don't cross me is don't kill each other. Right. But Hitler and John Wayne and Army Green. And so God can go to hell. His opinion doesn't count. Right. We can do whatever we want. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Scott, I have kept you over time.
Oh man,
but I really appreciate you being here, man.
Fun.
I know
I've filibustered so long. If you guys got follow-ups,
listen, I needed this tonight, man. I knew, I had a feeling that you would let it rip, and I could just kind of let you do your thing, dude. And it was beautiful. Great. And yeah, I could do this for 3 hours, but I know you got it. You're fixing to get some supper. Dan probably got.
I gotta eat, man. I'm gonna fall down.
I hear you, Scott. You're the best, man. And like I said in the beginning, I really appreciate you taking on some of this shit's like the most awful shit in the world, dude. And it means the world to me that you take it on. The guys at antiwar.com. I have to tell you, when Dan and I first started the show, Tommy Salmons came on like maybe episode 2 or 3 and invited me on his show. And he said, just so you know, you don't have a legit libertarian podcast until Scott comes on your show. So we're like 40 some episodes deep, and we finally made it happen. So I'm feeling good about that.
That's great, man. I'm very happy to be here. I appreciate both y'all very much.
No doubt. Do you want to tell anybody? I mentioned the books, but where to catch you if they don't? Everybody who's watching the show right now knows who you are, but tell them where they should go to get your stuff.
Well, my show is at scotthorton.org, and I got 5,800 and something interviews for you there. And going on 20 years, it'd be 20. I guess if I really hurry up, maybe I probably can't make it. I was going to say, it'd be nice if I could make 6,000 by mid-April. I don't think I'm going to make it, but pretty close. That'll be 20 years for the interview show. And then antiwar.com is the most important project on the internet. Although you'll find my show there, and I'm more of in a supervisory role there, kind of helping Dave DeCamp and Jason Ditz and Kyle Anzalone are doing the hard work. Eric Garris, of course, doing the hard work there at antiwar.com. And then I'm very proud of the Libertarian Institute. I got Lori Calhoun, Sheldon Richmond, James Bovard, and then a whole new generation of great young guys, including some of the staff from antiwar.com we share there at the Libertarian Institute. All great podcasts, including our friend Tommy Samas.
Yeah.
And
Keith Knight is really great. I love
Keith Knight is
man,
great.
Brilliant.
And yep. And so really proud of that. And then, yeah, the books. I mean, I wrote enough already. You know, Fool's Errand is the Afghanistan book. I really wrote that. That was chapter 2 of Enough Already that kind of got out of control. But I really wrote enough already, you know, not just for you guys, but hopefully for you guys to be able to give to your dad and your brother-in-law and your minister and people at work and say, like, look, man, give this a shot and see what you think and see if you can change your mind with the thing. You know what I mean? Because I don't want to just sell to my audience. I want on the margin, I want people to understand, again, with the social psychology, not just all the facts in there, but like, hey, Army colonels are passing this thing around and saying that you should read it. And it's got this, you know, from, you might guess their point of view of this subversive message against the entire Middle East war machine this whole time. And so I want, you know, again, with the whole like attack the right from the right thing, like we've talked about with Trump, I want to make it okay for people to know that you don't have to be a commie or even like lean left at all to oppose what they're doing. It ain't right. Ron Paul said you don't have to believe in it. Hell, Donald Trump now condemning it at the top of his lungs means you don't have to believe in this stuff anymore. And I really enjoy hearing from military guys. I haven't had a single military guy yet tell me, hey, I read your book and you don't know what the hell you're talking about. And I've had about 1,000 the other way, you know, and again, including Army colonels and stuff. I just interviewed a guy who taught Special Forces school, irregular warfare school. He says, oh, at least I don't know about the big proponents of counterinsurgency, but all the dissenters in the counterinsurgency community all read Enough Already and recommend it to their friends. And so, you know, that's the best I can do is Enough Already right there. And that's the one that I really hope to change your dad's mind with. So if people are interested in that, it's the history of all the terror wars from Jimmy Carter all the way through Donald Trump.
This is my whole life I'm born in 80. So from there on out.
Mine too. I mean, I'm born 76.
Yeah.
So like I remember the day Reagan was inaugurated. It's one of my earliest memories. So yeah, this is my lifetime. Yeah.
Thank you for the great work, Scott. And thank you for your time tonight, brother.
Oh yeah. Thank you both. Really appreciate it.
Anytime. Dan, Scott Horton came on the show, bro. Made it. We're legit.
You did it.
Yo, thanks. I didn't cry on myself once tonight. I'm really, really pretty proud of myself for that.
I'm proud you did. I was ready for it. It would have been okay if you did.
You would have stepped up. But man, he can go and rip. And that was fucking great.
I know. I was ready to step up. I did have like 4 or 5 questions, but it was not needed.
Yeah.
I don't know what
and
I
we
was
still
thinking.
went over the normal hour.
Yeah.
But yo, bro, I really appreciate you. And yeah, we'll do this again soon. And oh, don't forget, if you guys are watching still, go to Dan Smott's channel. The System is Down. He just uploaded an episode today. It's an hour long of Dan Torelli and I's experience at the Rage Against the War Machine rally. And we got interviews with Mike Heist, Jeff Douglas from the Mises Caucus, and Ben Swan and the Punk Rock Libertarians. And I got to chat with Ron Paul for about 5 seconds. And it was great. Everything I wanted and more. But man, I appreciate you, dude.
You too.
I'll see you
Check
soon.
you next
right?
time.
Peace. Ladies and gentlemen, did it. Feeling pretty good about it. Episode 44, Scott Horton. We're legit now. Don't forget to hug your doggos. You know what I mean? They're the best. Give them some love. All right. Love you, Evie. Bye, girl.